Today I want to tell a bit of the story of this church over the last few years, but while we were singing I was like, actually I'm going to take you a little bit further back. The last couple of years I've had the privilege of going to various groups and telling this story. Recently I went to the Auckland Clergy Conference, which means all the priests, vicars in Auckland gathered together and they wanted to hear the story of this church, but I actually took it back a little bit further and told some of my story, and I think for some of you it may resonate. I want to talk really around this theme today. I'm about to do something new. See, I have already begun. Do you not see it? I will make a pathway through the wilderness. I will create rivers in the dry wasteland. Many, many years ago, when I was a student, I was looking for a part-time job, went on student job search as you did, applied for a job at Pizza Hut in what I thought was Papanui. There were two available, Papanui or Aranui. I was scared of Aranui, so I chose Papanui. But I called the number, made the appointment, got the address on Pages Road and headed to what I thought was Papanui, and then was like, hang on a minute, I'm in Aranui. And anyway, I got the job, Pizza Hut, Aranui, and was one of the things I would do was deliver pizzas. It is not an exciting job, but it does pay well because you get this petrol allowance, and I was driving a Mini, so it was like, pretty good innings there. But in my boredom, I started praying for the houses because you get their last name and you'd get, where they lived, and so I could pray as I was about to deliver them a pizza, could pray for them. Remember, sometimes it was really intense. I'd be like praying for a name and then I'd just start weeping. So intense that in the end I was like, this is too much. I'm actually just going to go back to babysitting. But it was this funny thing that I drove the streets because it was this whole area. For years, I drove these streets and prayed for families in these streets. At one point also, around about a similar time frame, and I've mentioned this before, we had a man called John Wimber. He set up the the Vineyard movement globally. He came to our family's house for lunch because my dad was a pastor. Somehow they connected and he came and had lunch with us. And at the end of the lunch, he did this thing which, I find questionable, but he sat, and it was my brother and me and my parents were there, and he started prophesying, which means telling your future. Some of the things he said about me were wildly wrong, about how many children I was going to have. It was all a bit bizarre. But one of the things he said, you're searching for what you're meant to do with your life, and the answer is going to come from the east. And so from that moment on, I was looking, what's east of Christchurch? It's Latin America. I started learning Spanish. This is going to be amazing. And then I remember seeing Tony Campolo speaking at Parachute Music Festival, and he ran Eastern, as a lecturer, Eastern Theological Seminary. I'm like, that's it. That's where I'm going to go study. None of those things were true. And I always wondered, whatever happened with that. Then I eventually went and trained to be a vicar in Auckland. And while I was there, God, very clearly, I felt got the sense I was going to go to East Christchurch, and it took me a long time for the penny to drop that was East, nothing exotic at all. I live out here now, I love it. I actually do, because no one judges me if our lawns aren't mowed. It's great. Not like South Christchurch. But I got the sense that this is where I was to come. And then I had to wait, because in the Anglican system, you submit to the system, which is quite hard if you come from other traditions, and you just wait to be told. Remember, the bishop came to me and she said, Carolyn, you've got two options. You can go and do your training at St Margaret's as a chaplain, or, and I don't know how this will possibly work because they have no money, you could go to East Christchurch. And I was like, East Christchurch? I think God probably had to tell me that because the other one would have been quite a glamorous option and probably would have paid more. So here I am, here. And I feel like I was able to land in really green pastures. But that's not what I had grown up in a church that I absolutely loved. I thought it was my tūranga waiwai. It was my place where I felt the most at home. And yeah, it sort of started changing directions a bit, and I remember just feeling this sense of a lack of fit. And I left there, and for a long time I felt like I was in the wilderness. And I really wondered what on earth was going on. And yet here I am now, the happiest I think I could ever imagine being, to be in this place, to be with you, to see this view, to live here, to be able to do this role is just, I think, the most incredible thing. So I want to tell you that side of the story, because I know for some of you, you too have been in church and then you've left and it felt uncomfortable and you feel like you've been in a bit of a wilderness. And I think this is a story that God has good plans, that God will make a way. And whether it's here or somewhere else, God is at work in the world and is sowing seeds from way back when you wouldn't have even noticed, and that there is a place that you will land in green pastures. So I want to talk about this church, because this church too had fallen on tough times. Next year we celebrate 150 years of All Saints in Burwood. But just before I arrived, this was the church next door, and you may notice the paint job. It was painted to look like the inside of a Bedouin tent. And I'm not sure why the architect chose that. I can't see the biblical references. To me, it looked a little bit more circus-like. But here it is. Here, you can tell that this isn't a Sunday morning because there's a guitar, because it tended to be organ, sometimes keyboard, and it had really reduced to just a few people in the church. And then the earthquake struck. And if you look, there's the church. All this green area around it was housing. And suddenly, a whole lot of people that came to the church that lived locally disappeared. So the diocese, which is the Anglican body, said, okay, there's 3 churches that are really struggling. Let's just combine them all, and that'll make it work. That doesn't tend to work, combining churches. And I don't think it really did in this situation. It was uncomfortable. And then into this new parish was called the Parish of East Christchurch. And then into that, as I mentioned, I was sent as a curate. And there I am, fully robed in the old church for a traditional service. And the bishop said to me, Carolyn, start something new. And if it works, I'll break all the rules that mean after 2 years you have to leave your curacy placement and go somewhere else. I'll break all the rules and you can stay. So I was like, okay, we'll start a new service. And she's like, and I want you to do it now. I'm like, you can't start a new service that quickly. You just can't. So when are you going to start it? And I said, well, we'll run a Christmas Eve service with farmyard animals because we know that pulls a crowd. And then we'll launch the new service. And then we had a wee gathering, and it's really nice to see some of the people here. Trevor and Courtney were here right from day one praying for what was coming. So was Steve and Hannah, who were just dating at the time. Then I remember them getting engaged, married, babies, so it's super exciting to travel that journey. And the Howes were there, and I think these were the sort of first families, and we just prayed and ate pizza, and that something would happen in this space. And then we launched our new service, but first we did a new logo, then we launched the new service, and here you can see thousands turned away. What happened was people from the other service came. You can see the renter crowd. I can see my parents there. And that was the service. And it was hard work. I remember some days when the marathon was on and it was Father's Day and there's 20 people there, more people on stage than there is in the seats. And we had all this hope. And one of the key things you can see there, Guy coughing into his elbow. Well done, Guy. Sick then, sick now. You can see this crew up the front here. We had quite a decent group of musicians, and one of the reasons was we decided that the old house over the back, which was called the curate's house, we'd rent it really, really cheap in exchange for people turning up to church. It wasn't rent a crowd, it was pay for a crowd. And the deal was you had to serve in some capacity and turn up to church. And it kind of worked. It created this energy. Guy led that to begin with, and that was really early on, wasn't it? So he was there right from the ground up. So we had this little crew, but we had virtually no money. The decision was made to unzip the 3 churches that were together. 2 of them stayed together. We joined up with Shirley, but there was only about 3 people left in Shirley. And we had $200 in the bank at that point. We knew if the toilet exploded, that was it. The church would tank at that point. And so we started praying. We had this little prayer group that would meet on a Thursday morning. And we knew that the thing that would save us was if the insurance money from this house was paid out to us, that had just had a really quick kind of makeover. If the insurance money was paid out to us, and if it was paid out really quickly, and also we needed more money than we had calculated. So on this Thursday, we prayed, and I said, can we pray that we get the insurance money and that it's more than we expected and that we get it today? And then I was like, you can't pray that. That's too intense. That we get it in the next few days. And so we prayed that we would hear in the next few days. That afternoon, we got a call. You're getting your insurance money and it's more than you expected. And then we were able to buy a house that's just across there for that money. This is how it was marketed. And then we rented it out, and finally we had income and we could breathe. It was kind of like, okay, we're not going to fall over. But it was pretty stretched. I was being paid and that was it. So I was there answering the phones. I was pretty much doing everything, and it was pretty hard. And so I said to the bishop, can I drop to 80% so we can get some admin support and we can start putting some money towards our children's ministry? And the answer was hard no. We're not going to let you get underpaid in order to do that. And I fought and fought and fought, and eventually I won, and we were then able to invest in children and in administration. And I only had to do that for 9 months because at that point the church began to grow when we started investing in children, and we launched Lighthouse. But then we had another problem, and that was the hall. Now, a whole lot of you will never have experienced the joy of going into that hall. Is there anyone here who did go into that hall? A fair few of you, but not all of you. That hall that was across there was horrendous. It was written off in the 1990s, but the church still desperately needed it, so they shoved a coat of paint on and just kept going. The power board in it, if you touched a certain point, you could only touch it by standing on a chair, but if you touched that, we got told by several people, you would die. So I was like, can we please build something over it? And they're like, no, because it will catch fire and burn the building down with everyone in it. The toilets, you stepped down several steps and they were at ground level, and it looked like they'd perhaps just tipped some concrete on the ground. There was a vent in the floor. I don't know where it went, but whenever it rained, water would come up through the vents in the floor, so the toilets would just be this rank, dirty mess. Mould stains that you couldn't get over, freezing cold, really echoey, so super hard on your ears if you were there, and there was rats that lived in there. And that's where our kids' program was. And I thought to myself, I'm not sure that is a great place for children to be in. So, what are we going to do? Now, remember, Dawn, who goes to our 9 o'clock service, she's a faithful prayer, saying to me that she was praying we would win lotto. And I said to her, are you buying lotto tickets? And she said, no. I'm like, that would be a spectacular miracle. But we were like, what do we do? Here we were it really did feel like on the bones of our bums at this point, like how on earth are we going to get through this situation? And then, the great reveal, because we'd sort of joined with Shirley and we'd become legally the Shirley parish in order to unzip, it was revealed to us that we got their insurance proceeds, that they their building had fallen down, they hadn't rebuilt, they'd all left, and we became Shirley, and there was $4 million in the bank. And then we were like, wow, what do we do? And we could have gone crazy, but I think that the good thing that the church decided to do was to have a prayer and vision night, and this is when we prayed and sought God, what are we meant to do? And this was the purpose of it, to pray and listen to God for our future direction, with particular emphasis on seeking God's will for the future sites, because we owned the Shirley site as well, and the Shirley insurance proceeds. 35 people came from the usual congregations. It was an interactive night with brainstorming ideas. And so we went through, where should we place ourselves? We had the Shirley empty site. We had Burwood. What was God saying? Because we didn't think we should do 2 churches again. Then it was like, we need space. What sort of space should we create? And you can see people got to put stars on the things they like and then put post-it notes. And then what should our church look like? Was there other stuff that we should do? Again, what sort of spaces? And then what should we do with the money? And so several themes emerged from this. And so here was a bit of a summary in visual form of the things that people really liked. And this is around the what should we be doing. People wanted to see a garden, a collaborative or multi-purpose space, kids spaces, cafe, creative spaces. They wanted intergenerational church, community cottage or social housing project, and something around surf. And then the who, this was something that we came together and we prayed about, and people said, people who've been burnt by church, we should be a light and a balm to our culture. We want lonely and isolated people to find a home here. We want children to be welcome. We need to put more effort into young adults, and we want single parents to find a place to belong. So this was our praying, gathering, kind of seeking God, what do we do next? And then, someone made this comment, cut down all these roles to just a few, going hard on them but blue skying them before God. The community's passion and commitment must not exceed the level of effort required, or it will likely fail before too long. We're very aware, just because you have money doesn't mean you should sort of run ahead of yourself. We needed to learn to walk, to even crawl. And so here is, what really emerged that we were going to focus on. We wanted a space that was multi-use, that felt welcoming and kind of like a lounge. We wanted a beautiful kids space with a tree. We wanted creative spaces. We wanted a beautiful outside area. And we wanted social housing. And so I want to tell you, so this is what we felt God was saying to us. And I think what I have learnt along this path is I would think God would say, do this, and then you do it. What I think it's been more like is God is saying, I'm doing this. Are you joining in? Because it's going to happen. This is what I've got in mind, and get yourselves on board. And so already we have people in the church that started really emphasising, look at our gardens, they're so beautiful. There's a woman called Jenny who oversees this. We really wanted to make use of that. And then a miraculous thing happened. I was in a meeting and someone told me about the University Foundry building. This was the temporary student union building, and it had been built post-quake, designed to be taken down again and moved to be resurrected somewhere else. And it was actually, who was the City Council, now the Mayor of Christchurch, Phil Major, he was really insistent that this stay in Christchurch and if possible go to East Christchurch. So I was in a meeting and someone was saying that they were going to get this building and they were going to put it up in a community space a bit further north. And I looked at it and I was like, I think that could work for us. So I listened very intently to try and get the details, and all I heard was that there was a man called Daryl who owned it. And I went to the prayer meeting the next Thursday and I said, we have to find a man called Daryl. And that's all the information that I have. And so we prayed that we would find Daryl. And then that afternoon, I met the lovely Mary, who's here this morning, and she just started coming to church, and I said, remind me, what do you do for a job? And she said, I'm a project manager for the University of Canterbury, responsible for buildings. And I was like, I need to find Daryl's phone number. And she texted it to me that afternoon, and I called Daryl, and I said, can we be next on the list if it doesn't work out for the first lot? And he's like, well, obviously I've got to give them first shot. I'm like, yeah. But if it doesn't work out, can we be next? It didn't work out. we got this building. And so we decided that this is where it would go. There was a big piece of land, obviously, where we are. That's where it was going to sit. This is the view we knew that it was going to get. And so the architects drew up the pictures. And then, gosh, it took a long, long, long time. And eventually, on Easter Sunday morning, we were able to open. And the spaces that were able to be created from this were kind of like these images, a space that would feel like a lounge, a kid's room with a tree. And then we were able to gather in it. And even the opening, and some of you have probably heard this story many times, it was delayed and delayed and delayed and delayed. It was supposed to be October, then it was going to be first week of February, and then it just kept going on and on and on. And then, Easter was coming, and we got told it was going to be 3 or 4 weeks after that. And I emailed the City Council, and I think this is possibly the biggest miracle that we've ever seen. I emailed the City Council and I said, for us, Easter Sunday is the high point of our year. Is there anything you could do to do the final approval for Easter Sunday? The woman emailed back and, made no promises. I think it was the Wednesday before Easter, she started emailing me. It's now on the desk of X person. And then she'd email again. They've signed it off. I've now taken it to the desk of this person. They've signed it off. I've now taken it. And she walked through the whole day just from shoved it on their desk and got it signed. And that day we heard they had signed it off. We could have Easter Sunday. And here was this incredible story of rebirth. This church that had been, really struggling, was due to close, and then something quite incredible had happened there. So while this was going on, there was also the other things boiling along in the life of the church. And one of the most fun things that's happened has been our annual quiz night. Here you can see Guy, ready to be quiz master. The winners from a couple of years ago, and then we actually started being able to buy stuff, for the church, for the play group. We partnered with them. We've also been able to support things like this is Cyclone Gabrielle. We did a big fundraiser, and the money was able to go to them. Along the way, we also partnered with One Day Health. That's Nick and Tessa in Uganda opening health centres, and every year we've been able to support them at Christmas to be able to open a new health centre. So there's been these lovely things that have just emerged quite naturally because of people's passions. In the midst of it, I think our biggest crisis was probably COVID. That was a really difficult time. It was divisive, it was horrible, and not a good time really for the church at all. I think probably the only good thing that came out of it was that we discovered we liked outdoor church. In fact, that been our probably best attended services. And through that we also decided, we saw people burning themselves out, and we decided that we'd go lightweight, low maintenance instead. Just going to tell you a funny story because I was telling it to someone the other day. The first lockdown, our family decided that we would do really amazing content to put out. We'd record sermons, they'd have soundtracks, and so we went all out, and I was, doing the talking. Paul, my husband, who's home sick, was doing the lighting and the sound and the video. And it was really, really stressful. Come on, I've been sitting here for 3 hours while you get the lighting sorted. It doesn't even matter who No, it makes you look like you've got big black rings under your eyes. Get out, Eliza, go back to your room. Sometimes we finished at 4 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday, and then we produced it. Then the end of COVID came, the end of the lockdown, and we could go and extend our bubbles, and we went to my parents' house. My daughter ran to my mother, and she was like, how are you? She said, it's been so awful. Mum and Dad have fought the whole time. I was like, it wasn't the whole time, it was just every Saturday night. And then church got back together, the kids gathered together, and the kids were asked, how was it? And Eliza told all the church people, it was terrible, Mum and Dad fought the whole time. So the leaders all chatted and laughed amongst themselves. So anyway, we decided that was never happening again. Second lockdown, who cares? Live stream, pretty casual. But anyway, the point was to try and actually avoid that happening. just so you know that I'm a real person. But then in the midst of this, we came out of that, we were like, we need to ask God again. What is it that we want to be doing next? And we did this around the three themes of our Bishop Peter's strategic vision, which was making disciples, strengthening communities, supporting families. And again, very similar. People could love ideas, but they could also put their hands up for things they wanted to be a part of. And so this was some of the stuff that came out, and that was done on a Sunday morning during church. And then with What Have We Missed? And I want to talk you through some of the things that came out of this, because I think what happened with the new building is that we got completely distracted, and there was quite a lot of energy for some of these things, but we dropped the ball a bit. But now we have Guy, whose job is to help people find their place, to support people to start stuff. So I thought it's actually good to run through this, because there may be something you hear that actually resonates with you, and you're like, actually, I am interested in that. But here was some of the things that came out. Meals for people in need. It's interesting, that's what Serena then started. Contemplative prayer, that's quiet praying. Mental health support. Youth discipleship. Operation Christmas Child, or local equivalent. That was a teenager, Eilish, managed to get all the kids to go and vote. She may have actually been a kid at the time. Yeah, she got all the kids to go and vote and put their hands up. And te reo Māori classes, particularly te reo for tots. Picnics after church, and you'll see at the bottom, church camp. Bums support group and a spectrum support play group. That's for people on the autism spectrum, for their kids. And then planting natives. They were some of the things that came out on that particular day. But we really wanted to emphasise that we weren't going to do these things for the church. We wanted people to put their hands up and say, this is what I feel called to. We wanted to empower people to enact their dreams, allow people to start activities or programs, and stop as their capacity allows. Ensure there is no pressure to continue something someone else has started, allow things to spring up, but also to die down. In churches, that doesn't often happen. You know, you'll have something that someone started 20 years ago and it's still running and people are being begged, please, we need volunteers for this program, otherwise it's going to die. It's like, let it die. So we wanted to have this kind of loose way of holding it here. This is what we didn't want happening. Why doesn't our church have more programs? Ask family that never volunteers for anything. So this is what we're trying to avoid. And then we just sort of saw what happened from there. We did have a church camp. We put some energy in, and Cassie did all the energy behind that. That was an amazing time. And we're having another church camp this year. And this time we also signed up to become an eco-church, to help us focus and become better and more thoughtful about what we're doing with our waste, with our use of energy. Social and outreach activities began to happen again. We restarted the Guess Who's Coming to Lunch just a few weeks ago, another amazing time together. Stefan did a song-along, which is an example of someone's just like, I've got an idea, shall I do this? The answer's yes. Hannah did a matariki stargazing. And then Eilish did her kohātari. We found a local Christmas shoebox. She's run that for the last few years. Serena last year was able to start a meals for people in need. And when she studied, that's in hiatus. And then for our contemplative prayer, we've been able to start our Thursday night weekly prayer. But what has also been interesting is actually watching what's happening in this building, not necessarily driven by us. Siu, who does go to our church, is part of Loopy Tunes, which is bilingual preschool music classes. One of their venues closed down and they said, can we come to you instead? And we were like, yes, you can. And a lot of the stuff that's happening, you'll see there on the left, the red stars, they're things run by people in our church. But then there's a whole lot of stuff that's happening in our church, not run by people in our church, but the building is hosting it. You know, there's a couple of autism support groups there, the Find My Tribe. There is Sing and Sign, lots of stuff for older people, things for people to get together and support one another. And I'm really interested to see what's happening in the building Soon we're going to be having Te Reo Māori classes, hopefully run by someone outside of the church. It's just interesting, and it really has reinforced to me this idea that I think God is at work and something's going to happen in this space. We might be the ones to do it, but we might not be. But it's really incredible to see what is happening. The other thing that we have been looking at, we own the beautiful little St Mark's building in Prestons, or Marshland, and again looking, because it needs earthquake strengthening, how can we turn that into a contemplative space? And then after this, the last thing that we've done recently is really try and figure out who are we as a group, who do we want to become? And so we started an exercise where the vestry started asking people, what did you feel when you came here? What do people say about their experience here? And then we kind of pulled out some of those ideas, took them to the staff. They said, yes, we think this is true. And so we came up with a list that describes what some people have described the church as, but also, and importantly, who do we want the church to be? Who do we want to grow into? What is kind of the personality of this church that we could be more of? And I was really interested last week. We had a guest speaker, and he said, I loved coming to this church. It's so authentic. And I said, oh, thank you, tick. That's our number one. But this is one of the things that's like, these are the values that we are striving to be. And, trying to live into. Who has God called us to be? We want to be authentic people. We don't want to have the mask up. We don't want to always be pretending. We want to be accepting of other people, welcoming, embracing, showing manaakitanga to all people who come through these doors and those outside. We want to be empowering. If you've got an idea, you can do it. The answer is yes, as long as you find someone else to do it with you. But the answer is yes, and we want to be innovative. Let's try new things and not be scared. So here's been the story of the church over the last few years. When I think about it, I just think this incredible goodness has overflowed there. Every time I look at this view, I think, how good is this? And I love that we sang that song this morning about the goodness of God. And I think there's a lot here to learn about the character of God when we are in a wasteland, when we think there is no hope, when we're looking at our own lives and seeing only desert ahead. God is a God who turns desert and wasteland into flourishing gardens. Literally, we saw that here. It was sandy soil, and Jenny has shipped in the good soil, and it is producing fruit and it is flourishing. This is how God operates. This is what we have seen happen here, and this is what I have seen happen in individuals' lives as well. Just want to have a little moment of quiet, just to reflect, because there's been a lot of information. What do you think God might be saying to you in all of this? Is there something for you personally where maybe you've felt you've been in a wasteland? Is it something about being brave enough to try something? Do you want to put your hand up and say, actually, I secretly am passionate about that area too? I'm scared of committing because I got burnt in my last church, but actually I feel really good about that kind of thing. Whatever it is, let's have a wee moment just to let God talk to us, and then I'm going to pray together. Hear the words of Isaiah. I'm about to do something new. See, I have already begun. Do you not see it? I will make a pathway through the wilderness. I will create rivers in the dry wasteland. God, you are a God who brings goodness when we can only see destruction. I want to thank you for the journey this church has been on. I want to thank you for the privilege of being part of it. Thank you for all you have done here, your goodness constantly on display. God, I also recognise that you are at work in the world, whether we notice you or not. You are bringing life and hope, and sometimes we don't see it. So I pray, give us eyes to see what you are doing around us. God, I pray, give us courage to put our hands up, to join you in what you are already doing in the world. You are good, God, and we thank you for that. Amen.